welcome to another episode of The Billy Ho Show. Coming up is Guy Fawkes, and when I was a boy, Guy Fawkes was a great event. It's skyrockets and crackers, Roman candles I think they were called, and little spinners. It was a lot of fun. And after school I used to work, as I said once before, for George Loret's. And at Guy Fawkes, George Loret's would have a great big bonfire and invite all his friends, and we'd have a bit of a party at his place. But it was my job during that Guy Fawkes week to go and collect up all the rubbish and actually build up the bonfire. And then we set light to it about 6 or 7 o'clock at night, and the crackers would be going and everybody would have a lovely time. Now I just remember the boys, the big boys, turned up and they had 4 tubes, copper tubes, about that big, with a wick stuck out the end, and they raced off down into the market garden, and they come racing back and all went, oh, and then boom, 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 great big huge blue flash down the garden, so went, and I thought, well, they had 4 and only 3 went off, so tomorrow I'm going to go down and find that 4th one. So the next day I went down, searched around, and I found it had a wick about that long, and I took it home and got Johnny Lindsay and my brothers, and we stuck this in the garden, and I lit fire to it and ran like anything, and boom! Blew a bloody big hole in the garden. Mum come out, get in your room, wait till your father comes home. Oh boy, did I get a hiding for that one. But anyway, I just remember that from my childhood, going down to George Loret's and enjoying a great big bonfire on Guy Fawkes night. So let's get on with the show. This is Barry Caulfield's 1974 Kenworth, and our story this week is about the Kenworths in Barry's collection. But first, we go back to the beginnings of Kenworth back in 1917. Yes, that's right, 1917. So let's go back in history.
In World War I, all your 6-cylinder engines were taken over by the government for military. Well, he couldn't call himself a GER 6 anymore. But he had a lot of body parts, but no engines.
Okay.
So Mr. Kent tried to buy him out and didn't have enough money. So he went to a Mr. Worthington, who had more money than good sense, I think. But he went with him, and they bought GER 6 out. Well, they had to figure out a name. Kent and Worthington. This become Kenworth.
Oh, wow.
But the neat thing about this is, they comes to our truck show every now and then, is one that looks exactly like this. Same color, same everything. But instead of saying GER 6, it says Kenworth in there. I want that truck right there.
So you got 1 point. Well, that's amazing, folks. We've been looking at Kenworth on our way, going back to probably the 50s. But here we go back to 1917, and when Kenworth was born.
Actually, he was born before that.
Oh, really?
That's when when he sold out.
Oh, right. Oh, okay. Well, so they've been around a long time. Here, the first Kenworth. There it is.
Like I say, that other one that says Kenworth right there, exactly the same, because they used up his parts that he'd already had made before they started building their own.
Wow. Wow. Well, welcome back, and with me is Barry Caulfield, and Barry, welcome to the show once again. And we haven't really done Kenworth, Barry, in a sort of in-depth sort of a way. We went to America, and in one of the museums there we saw the first Kenworth, which wasn't called a Kenworth, it was the Ken and the Worth. There were 2 different names when they started with Kenworth.
I never knew that.
And they put them both together and come up with Kenworth. And then we come all the way to New Zealand, and it took a while to get here because we're still under the must buy Leylands, must buy Commas, must buy regime. And so the government, who seemed to be immune to all this, sort of could bring in a Pacific in 1954. And then somewhere along the line, Kenworth got introduced, and I think they came from Canada. The first ones, but maybe the government bought them for forest products, so we need bigger trucks to do bigger jobs. And so what we're leaning on is the very first one.
It's the beginning.
The beginning. And maybe tell us a bit about this truck.
This one was sold in 1964. It was one of two that come to New Zealand Forest Products.
The very first two.
The very first two to come to New Zealand. So that year there was 5 come in. And there's a great debate about which one was first.
Okay.
Because the 3 that come in after the 2 big ones had lower serial numbers. But the shipping records tell us that the 2 big 848s come in May, and the other 3 come in July.
So these were off highway.
These are off highway. Yep.
So there's a photograph somewhere I seem to remember of all forest products all lined up about 1960 something.
Yep.
And are these 2 trucks in that photo?
There's 3 Kenworths in that photo, and they were all brand new. So the photo must have been taken in 1965.
Oh, okay.
Because in 1965 there was another 5 come in, which Steptoe was one of that order, famous Steptoe from Gisborne. So these were in 64 working, and the other one was brand spanking new. So in that photo, that photo was taken in 65.
This is, I was just here on the top of the engine here in 1964. It's got a turbo. Did you think that was unusual?
Very. When I bought this truck, it was sold to me as a complete original spec truck. And when it turned up, I questioned the guy that sold it to me, because the first thing I seen was a turbocharger.
Yeah.
Now, I was brought up with trucks, this is my era. And I never thought turbos come to New Zealand until the first 290 Kenworths turned up in about 1972. So
we're almost 10 years before and there's turbos.
Absolutely. And then after I purchased this truck, I was in Oregon, and I purchased the 1953 Kenworth, and bugger me, it's got a turbo on it as well.
So the technology's been well before
we're
us.
way behind the times.
Yeah. So the next bunch of Kenworth to turn up after this, are any of those here?
I haven't got any in my collection, but 1965, Steptoe was one of that lot.
One of the 5.
Yes. So Steptoe was actually the first road registered Kenworth in New Zealand. All the rest come in were off highway. So New Zealand Forest Products had 2 in 64. I'm not sure if they bought 1 or 2 in 65, and Wilkinson Davies bought 3.
For their projects down the South Island on the west coast there.
And so Steptoe was the first road registered one, all the rest were. I think they done a big tunnel job somewhere and they used those Kenworths.
Oh, righto.
Yeah.
Righto. So the off-highway jobs, did they tow more than one trailer like the Pacific?
No, only the one trailer in those days.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. New Zealand Forest Products never had the roading infrastructure like Kaingaroa did.
Right. Oh, okay. So it's down to one. But here it is, just the chassis and an engine. And so where's the cab?
Well,
Gone.
it's in the workshop.
Or eaten by old Mr. Arse.
We went to a New Zealand Forest Products reunion just a couple of years back, and it was quite interesting. They had folders of various accidents they've had in their lifetime, and each fleet number featured 3 or 4 times with tip overs.
Wow.
So when we got this truck, it had well and truly been through the mill, and the cab was way beyond repair. It had been patched with some fairly hefty steel in the past, and it was just beyond what we want to do with it. So
Sure. The 2 Kenworths behind us, where do they fit in the scheme of things?
well, it was just funny enough. We were talking about Dick Twizzleton a while ago with a couple of whites.
Yes.
This truck was Dick Twizzleton brand new in 1978, Gisborne. This one here is also the one on the left. That's a New Zealand Forest Products truck, fleet number 42. So that came in 1970.
So which is way past this, isn't it? But it still looks the same. Is there something about the cabs?
That's the new style cab. If you look at the earlier cabs, like Steptoe, they've got a pressing through the side of the through the middle of the door and around the back of the cab, and that's to add a bit of strength to the flat panels to stop them from vibrating.
And their doors are a bit sort of like
yeah, wedge shape.
Yeah, wedge shape. Yeah.
So 1964, this style cab come out in America, and had fiberglass roof to try and keep the weight down, and the cab's made 100% out of aluminium.
So To keep the weight down.
keep the weight down. Yeah.
And you're putting together a couple of cabs in the shed there, which, like you were saying, the one's all steel,
Yeah.
and then one's aluminium.
Yep.
And then to try and get that weight down a bit more, they've given it a fiberglass roof.
Yeah, they've gone all aluminium and fiberglass in 64.
And so they got that right in 64. Right, ain't broke, don't fix it. And so that's the cab that sort of went through to where?
Yeah. So 64, that style cab went right through until the T900, which was sold in New Zealand. Oh, I'll have to check, but around 1990. Same cab.
Wow. And then if it ain't, as I said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
And one thing about Kenworth, and Pacific for that matter, is the narrowness of the cab. And you're sort of sitting in here, you got your mate sitting next to you, you're like this just about,
Yep.
two big guys. What was the reason for the reasoning behind having such a narrow cab?
Well, they're practical people. So when you're driving down the road, we didn't have air conditionings, and we were blessed with heaters by those days, but certainly never had air conditioning. So the narrow cab was just to reach across the seat, and it was a little effort like this to wind down your passenger's window.
You let a bit more air in.
Yeah, so and it was just the way it was, and everything just got bigger and bigger underneath them.
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. So we've got these guys. What's the next in your sort of old, what you've got here?
Well, currently we're restoring two Kenworths. This is 1964, which is very important to Kenworth history in New Zealand. And I'm restoring a 1957, which is the highway version of this truck. So the model of this truck was called an 848. The bush highway version of this truck was called a 548. We're restoring one now. They're quite a unique truck, completely different mudguards and everything on them.
Oh, okay.
And then I've got a 1953, it's a 542, which is a complete highway spec truck.
Can we have a look at that?
Yes, we can. Yep.
We're going to have a look in Barry's shed there. He's got quite a collection of trucks that we've shown you over the years we've been doing this. So let's go and have a look at this 53. Milburn Lime, every time. Milburn Lime, available all over the Southland district and beyond. Top grade lime that's been available year after year. Call them on 03 417 8228. The next time you need lime, think Milburn Lime, every time. Well, my 2022 calendar is now available, and it's available at Paper Plus, Wickles, and a whole range of independent bookstores. But if you go looking for it, it's not too hard to find. And if you can't find it, just send me a text or an email, and I'll see if I can get a copy to you. I've only got a few left, but on the back are all these old trucks rusting away, and they're all from the 40s, 50s and 60s, these old girls, but they've all had their time in history, and they've all had their time in New Zealand history, doing whatever it is they did. Also, my wife Linda, and our cameraman, she does a calendar as well, which is all about planting, and she does a little chart inside here that says planting by the moon. I do a fishing calendar, which is fishing by the moon. Linda does this calendar, planting by the moon, and all these different codes, all these different colours, different times to go planting. And if you'd like this, you can just send Linda a text on 021 825960, 021 825960, and she'll get a copy to you as well. But these are also available in Wickles, Paper Plus, and a whole range of independent bookstores. So there you go, two calendars, mine and Linda's. Go and get your copy. When we went to America, Barry, we saw a lot of these trucks with that mudguard, and I don't think when the first Kenworth turned up here they had the mudguard. They've gone past that.
Oh, way beyond that, yep. By 1959 they introduced a fiberglass mudguard.
Gets more weight off it.
Yeah, and a prettier style too, you know.
Okay. The trucks have got to be pretty. If they're pretty, we'll sell more.
Yep, absolutely.
So 1953, you know, we've still got East Bedfords and, you know, hippos and
Criminal, just criminal, wasn't it?
and this was available, but the government says, no, we've got to support, you know, them.
Well, I don't think anybody in New Zealand were aware of what was over there. God, if it was my dad's time, I'm sure he would have been over there and bought one back.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you know, you can imagine the 848 we've just looked at, those drivers hopped out of an R190 to hop into that truck. You know what I mean? It's like hopping out of a Tiger Moth into a Concorde, you know?
Yeah.
It's just huge step
difference.
up.
Yeah. So 1953, what's available on this truck? That's
Well, this is what they call it. This was a high spec model. It come out with a wide mouth, which is the American term for a high radiator.
oh, okay.
And the wide mouth was put on trucks that went into the desert, up into the high country. So this was spec with the big radiator, aluminium wheels. It had a Mercury sleeper box on it, which is pretty rare for today, and there'll be one on this truck by next year. It had transmission gauges, diff temperature gauges, which we didn't see anything like that until the 70s.
No.
Of course, aluminium wheels, we didn't know they existed until the 80s.
Wow.
They're still tube type, they're not a tubeless, they're a tube type aluminium wheel.
Wow.
But this truck has got an aluminium chassis, 100% aluminium chassis.
Really? An aluminium chassis, Barry? That's unheard of in 1953 here, anyway.
Well, it's unheard of here, full stop. We've seen a couple come to New Zealand in the very late 70s. They tried a couple, but it was a cheap fix. They were steel up to the back of the cab, and then they bolted aluminium flitches on, which failed, of course. But this is a genuine Kenworth chassis. This truck's 1953. It's done nothing but heavy haulage work. There's not a blemish in this chassis. There's no repairs, no cracks.
So it survived.
It's simply a cost thing. That's why we don't see them still.
Oh, okay.
Just amazing.
And the gear stick, is that like twin sticks in there?
Yep, absolutely. So that's a 4-speed Spicer gearbox. This truck does 88 mile an hour.
Wow, really?
So that's how they had them spec'd for their roads, and they didn't drink much fuel. They were slow going uphill, but they made up for it going down the other side. So
Wow.
the back end is not original in this truck. The back end's out of a 1965 Kenworth, and it's called a torsion bar suspension. And although they're very comfortable, they're not practical for New Zealand conditions.
What's the sticking out the back here, Barry?
That's a part of the suspension. So we don't have springs.
Oh, okay.
All the shock loading's done through the torque rod that runs through there.
So
And you can unbolt that cap and adjust it if you want harder or softer suspension.
Wow. So
Moving parts for Africa, you know, just
wow. Let's have a look inside. Just first glance in there, Barry, is there's a kink on the side of the second lever over there, and I guess you have your gear sticks how you like them. I know Matty Franicevic, his one was way up here somewhere. He liked them really high.
yeah.
And this one's got a sort of like a bike handle.
That's an American thing. I haven't seen it anywhere else but in the States.
Okay.
And I don't know why, because it's no easier to change like that.
No. Wow.
Maybe they used to rest their hand on it. I don't know what the purpose for that is, but it's a 4-speed auxiliary box, that lever.
And the gauges you were talking about are all just set into the
Yeah,
dashboard?
the transmission and diff temperature gauges are missing out of this truck nowadays.
Oh, okay.
They'll get put back in as we restore the truck. But this truck was done up by a hot rodder in Oregon, and he done the upholstery himself. And when I bought it, he was ever so proud of his job. And I told him it'll be the first thing that comes out when I get it home. All as they had was a cardboard hood lining and a cardboard around the back of the cab, and a rubber mat. That's all this was steel.
In Canada, we saw a truck with triple sticks, and the pattern was up on the roof there, what each stick did.
Really?
Yeah, triple sticks, who'd have thought, you know? It's hard enough for bloody 2, let alone 3. Had a lot of gears.
No, I haven't come across that one.
And it comes really, really slow. I'll send you a photo, yeah. Now look at this, folks. There's the triple sticks in this Mac when we were in Canada. Amazing.
Yep.
Born in 53.
Born in 53.
That's a bit after me.
Eh?
A bit after my time. Let's have a look in here, Barry. It's-
Not like that anymore. Is that going to stay up there?
Can we do something here?
Oh, let's clip it in here, Bill. Is that open enough?
Yep, I think. Yep.
It's hitting the sun visor.
So the first thing I noticed, Barry, is this big yellow arrangement here with big tubes feeding it
It's a hairdryer.
like the hairdryer. Yeah.
1953 with a turbocharger. You had two options. This is the 220 Cummins engine, which was the same engine that was in that Buff Wedding 210 truck that we done. Same engine. And then later on, you had an option of a turbo or a supercharger, and the supercharger was gear driven.
Wow.
Done the same job as the turbo,
Yep.
but the turbo is driven by exhaust gases, of course. So those are the two options. We never had those options in New Zealand. A few of the smaller Cummins motors, like what's in that white there, come out, the 160 Cummins and the 180 Cummins, they had the gear-driven blower on them. We didn't have the option of blower or turbo,
Just the basic.
just the basics.
I'm just noticing the distance between here and here. Just that the bonnet just seems to be a bit longer than what I.
Well, there's plenty of room. You know, the truck, being a true American truck, everything's practical. So they build a truck that you can walk around inside and out.
Easy to fix.
Yeah, try and work on one today.
I see lots of plastic.
Yeah.
That's just it's just having that longer bonnet. But I guess, as you say, in 1953, that's the Kenworth. That's what they did.
So I was 13 years old when my dad considered me old enough to start driving the logging truck, like my older brother before me. So we would hop in the truck at 5 o'clock in the morning and sit in the truck all day just to drive the truck from Te Puke back to Rotorua at night. That was our little drive. So that was in the early 60s. We were driving a truck 180 horsepower. This was 1953, 275 horsepower, you know, can you imagine it?
Like I was
We
saying,
thought we were kings at 180, you know.
No.
So,
And even, sort of Uncle Harry thinking, he's getting a 130, or 132 or something, the comma.
yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, no, they're just miles ahead of us. It's just, when you get into it over there, it just blows you away.
It just
you know?
blew me. Just
Yeah.
looking at that museum we looked at, everything that was in between 40 and 60 was just colossal like this.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And I think Australia may have got a couple of them, but maybe not.
Yeah, Australia got a lot of early American stuff. I don't know why, but
Because I thought they would have been in the same boat as us, you know.
but they
can't-
sort of do what they please, don't they?
Yeah, we need to tow all these trailers to Perth. We need to tow all these trailers to Darwin.
Yeah.
We can't do it with this bloody comma. Fair enough.
Yeah. So just talking about the style of cabs before, Bill, and this cab here is their 1947 design, and it stayed in production until 1963.
47 to 63.
Yep.
It's all,
And the only changes they made in that was slight changes to the quarter light windows, slight changes to the dash.
well,
By 1959, they introduced a little bit of wood grain to the dash, which made them quite a stylish truck. So 64, they brought out the 47, they were all steel right up to the mid-50s. Then they started introducing aluminium roof, aluminium back panel. And then 64, when they brought that model out, they introduced a fiberglass roof with the rest of the cab all aluminium. Had very little steel in them. So a bit of steel around the structure and the floor pan was about the only bit of steel in them. So that 64, as I say, stayed right up until the 900 series ended, which was about 1990.
wow.
So,
So looking at this big long bonnet, there's another Kenworth down there. It's got a bonnet about this long. Maybe we could have a look at that. Or is that about a 72 or something?
that's a 72. That's an S2 model Kenworth, and that was designed for city running.
Oh, so this is the round town deliver the bread and the milk sort of truck.
Practical people do not have a cab sitting over top of a front axle. You must have a bonnet.
Fair enough. Barry, we just looked at the 53 and that bonnet comes out probably another nearly 2 feet out in front.
Yeah.
And so we've gone to the shorter version. Is this something they did on purpose?
Yes, this was designed for city running. They call them an S series, which stands for short nose.
So this is sort of like the delivery truck that goes to the supermarkets and the dairies and drops off parcels and that sort of thing.
Pretty much. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe it's actually an Australian design.
Oh, okay.
This particular truck, 1972, they had Shell in Melbourne cancelled the order. So they both come to Delphin King bought them to New Zealand. And John Pullen, who you've met, is on the Classic Run,
yes.
He bought them both brand new. And then my dad bought this one off John.
And turned it into a tow truck.
It went to, we sold it to, I've got a memory fade, to another logging contractor. I can't think of his name.
Yep.
I know him well.
Who shall remain nameless.
So, yeah, so it had 3 other owners after us, and then they ended up down in Dunedin and they converted it to a tow truck.
Oh, okay. So that's
It was interesting in that I lost track of the truck because I've got a very special connection with this truck. And I lost track of it for a while, and it turned up in the New Zealand Trucking magazine in 1996. It was the April Truck of the Month. And they wrote an article about it, and probably 90% of the article was false. They just, so I wrote them a letter and put them straight on a few points, like everything they discussed. And so they wrote back to me and thanked me and then printed my letter in their article, which was good of them. We set them straight on a few things, but yeah, just an amazing truck. So these short bonnet ones, the Aussies designed them in the mid-late 60s, and they put 8B71 Detroits in them.
Shit.
So by 1972, the 903 Cummins was a very, very successful V8 Cummins engine, and so these were fitted with the Cummins. And then the later versions, they made them up to 1987, these short ones. And the later ones went back to Detroit. They had 6V92s in them, developing 330 horse.
So they came, they did their time, and that's the end of it.
Gone.
Yeah,
gone. If you take note of the cab over truck next door, you'll see why.
Oh, the blue one?
The blue one. You'll see why people preferred to stay with bonneted trucks. So if you look at the back of the engine,
Yep.
you've only got 2 feet in your dash panel.
Yep.
When you've got a cab over truck, you've got to go from the back of your engine along the chassis rail, up through the top, and then back to your dash. So instead of having 2 feet, you've got 2 metres.
It's 2 metres. Wow.
And because every time you bend the truck, the wiring loom bends like that. After time, you get nothing but trouble. So that's why the Americans hung on to the bonneted trucks for as long as they did.
We spoke to an old bloke who says, I said, why is cab over sort of, they don't make many cab, no, Bill, they don't make many cab overs there. And why is that? Is it because of the new rules about saving fuel and the big flat front on it, sort of pushing air? No, it's because the drivers won't drive them.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Yeah, because you're right at the accident. You're right there. You're the first one there. You've got a bonnet in front of it. At least you've got a bit of a chance. So that's the reason why they don't make cab overs.
Yeah.
I always thought these were intimidating. Just the size of the front of it, big flat up there. I'm 6 foot something or other, and it's way above me. But if you're sitting in your car, just a little Japanese car, and you're sitting at the lights, this pulls up behind you, all you can see is that. Best part of the truck, you think?
Yeah. I reckon the bumper is the best part of the truck. They're not the prettiest thing you've ever seen. But I suppose they serve their purpose. As they change road rules and regulations, the overall length would become a quite important factor of what you could cart.
What you could cart, and that's what this cab over was all about.
Yeah.
The shorter it is, the less room for the driver, more room for money.
Basically, you get rid of the bonnet with the extra length you've got, you can put another ton of payload on the back.
Yeah.
So.